In 1985, 24-year-old Wayne Adam Ford was discharged from the US Marines due to his behavior.
He's become insubordinate. He doesn't take orders from anybody. He's belligerent.
Ford found work as a long-distance truck driver, transporting goods up and down California. He would pick up sex workers along the route before murdering them and dismembering their bodies.
This is somebody who's dangerous because they can't control their behaviors.
Ford disposed of his victims' body parts in different locations. But sometimes he kept souvenirs from his kills.
He cut off the breast. He melted the breast in the oven. Then he drained the oil and put it in a coffee can.
You have to be a cold-blooded, brutal person to do something like that and to be able to stomach it.
As investigators from different jurisdictions pieced together the gruesome evidence, Wayne Adam Ford was revealed to be one of the world's most evil killers. In November 1998, 36-year-old Wayne Adam Ford and his brother spent the day together, reliving their youth.
Ford had just spent some time with his brother doing somewhat fun childhood activities like going to the zoo, and everything seemed fine.
To the shock of his brother, Ford told him that he had hurt some people, but wouldn't elaborate any further details.
His brother says, "You have to go to the police. You have to hand yourself in."
Ford agreed to turn himself over to the authorities, but nobody was prepared for what happened next.
Ford appeared at the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, during which he produced from his pocket a Ziploc bag with a woman's severed breast in it.
A serial killer had walked into a sheriff's office and produced a woman's body part to prove that he was a cold-blooded killer.
The unexpected confessions to follow would shock the world and reveal the true extent of Wayne Adam Ford's gruesome crimes. This killer's story begins on the west coast of America, in a city in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Wayne Adam Ford was born in 1961 in Petaluma, California. Very scenic area, and that's where he grew up in. His father was an American citizen. His mother was an immigrant from Germany.
Ford also had a brother who was 2 years older than him.
Ford seemed to have a fairly normal childhood, although there was a question over the state of the relationship between his parents.
When he was 10, his parents divorced. It was a very traumatic experience for him, and he was very angry over it, by all accounts. Angry at his mother over the divorce. His mother basically left her 2 sons behind in the care of Wayne's father and traveled the world.
This was thought to be very difficult for Ford because he was probably still the closest to his mother, and he was kind of left without parental supervision or somebody who could really care for him.
Not having a particularly close relationship with his father, Ford found this period of his life particularly difficult.
Although Ford carried on with his studies, he didn't graduate from school. So instead, in 1979, at the age of 17, he looked to a career in the US Marines.
He enlisted in the US Marine Corps, taking his job seriously. He worked hard, he was dedicated, and he advanced in rank.
For the most part, he was viewed as a good soldier, a good Marine.
In October 1980, when he was 19, Ford met a woman the same age as him on a blind date.
They started a very quick courtship, they got married, but their marriage was tumultuous from the start. They broke up a lot, then got back together. He had a lot of demands for her, and he was very controlling towards her. And essentially, some of his demands included being in the traditional housewife role, cooking for him 3 times a day, basically tending to any of his desires and whims.
In November 1980, a traffic incident caused Ford serious physical problems.
The car sideswiped him, threw him into a ditch, which then damaged the frontal lobe of his brain. So he ended up in a coma. As he said, it was a coma for a number of days.
A lot of people say that that appeared to be the point when his behaviour seemed to change, and that is quite plausible.
He was troubled before, but now he became a real time bomb. Plenty of aggression, plenty of depression, all rolled into one very, very troubled young man.
But aside from this traumatic brain injury, there were also earlier warning signs already of his decompensating mental health.
In June 1983, his wife finally asked him for a divorce. Ford was still in the Marines at this point, and his behavior didn't go unnoticed by those in charge.
Ford begins to decline psychologically and starts having trouble with work, to the point where Ford's superiors recommended that he be psychologically evaluated, and he was sent to a psychological facility, and the doctors that evaluated him diagnosed him with depression and alcohol abuse.
Certainly for Ford, it appeared that a big part of it was anger, and anger towards others, thinking that others are out to harm you in some way, not being able to trust other people, and having a lot of ups and downs in all of his interpersonal relationships he had at the time.
He was never calm. There was nothing about Wayne Ford that you could say was steady or solid. He was always trembling on the edge of something dreadful, something extraordinary.
Ford was sent to the Naval Psychiatric Hospital in Long Beach by the Marines to deal with the issues that he was exhibiting.
The doctors deemed him a possible threat to himself because he had suicidal tendencies. And he was further evaluated by doctors and put on drug therapy.
Ford seemed to recover enough to return to active duty, and in 1984, he was sent on an assignment to Japan.
But that really doesn't work. He's become insubordinate. He doesn't take orders from anybody. He's withdrawn, he's sulky, he's belligerent, he's all this mixture of things that are going on inside his personality all bubble to the surface and make him incredibly difficult to control.
He became violent, and eventually he was diagnosed as having borderline personality disorder, which now we're getting into the kind of territory where we might think, yes, this man's got some serious problems and they might be played out on other people. And he was honorably discharged from the Marine Corps after that.
But at the age of 25, Ford was involved in an incident with a sex worker in Garden Grove in Southern California.
He came into contact with the Garden Grove police for beating and raping a prostitute. Those charges were never filed because the victim refused to press charges.
I think that he felt like perhaps he was above this person and he could do whatever he wanted to this person because she was a sex worker.
That same year, Ford's reckless and aggressive behavior came to light once again.
There was also a case where he was in a dispute with a neighbor, and he pulled out a handgun and shot and killed the neighbor's dog. He was arrested and convicted of that crime and spent 10 days in jail for it.
Ford was 26 years old and had already exhibited deviant and dangerous behavior towards humans and animals. And the man who was living on the edge was showing no signs of slowing down.
He becomes fascinated with sexual perversion, and particularly both exhibitionism and teenagers. He becomes extremely promiscuous.
He was accused of being sexually inappropriate with young women, and this then does start to be a predictor that this person is on a journey that we don't want to escalate.
But while all this was going on behind the scenes, Ford was presenting himself as a completely different person in public.
He was really a chameleon. If he were to walk in the room right now, you would have no indication that he is a very dangerous human being. Good-looking guy, big, strong, muscular guy, former Marine, kind of that all-American look to him. So his appearance was very disarming, and that allowed him to prey on people.
In October 1994, when Ford was 32, he married a woman who would become his second wife.
But it's not long before cracks start developing the relationship. Early in the marriage, Ford becomes controlling and abusive.
In particular, she doesn't realize the levels of sexual promiscuity he indulges in, and indeed encourages her to take part in too. To some extent, Wayne Ford's puppet, and she quickly comes to learn it.
In 1995, when his wife was 5 months pregnant, she left to go live with her mom in Nevada. But during the course of the pregnancy, they began to have an on-again, off-again relationship.
In 1995, their son was born, and for a while, Ford and his wife tried to work through their problems.
In a sense, that was one reason why they wanted to try again, a new life in Las Vegas, but it didn't work. And in the summer of 1996, she takes her son away and announces that's the end of their marriage.
There was a lot of tension in the relationship, and when the couple divorced, he accused his ex-wife of keeping their son from him. He repeatedly said that he was denied access to his son, and he hated his ex-wife for it.
It was a claim his ex-wife denied. After the breakdown of their marriage, Wayne Adam Ford moved over 700 miles away from Nevada to Northern California.
He ended up living in a mobile home trailer park in the Arcata, California area. While he was in Arcata, he found work as a truck driver.
So he was able to go up and down the 5 freeway. So he was in Lodi, he was in Vegas, he was in Southern California, Northern California, up to the Oregon border. So that was his stretch for his job.
The town of Arcata, where Ford was living, lay north of Arcata Bay, and the town of Eureka lay on the other side, 7 miles away. Many waterways weaved around the area, and one of those was the Ryan Slough.
In October 1997, a kayaker on the Ryan Slough noticed what he thought was a mannequin stuck along the riverbank. Upon closer inspection, he realized that it was a human torso.
It was a truly shocking discovery in that the body of the female had her head removed, her arms removed, her legs removed, and she had been cut up the center of her torso and basically disemboweled.
She had 30 stab wounds. She's been mutilated, dismembered. A killing of the most extreme rage and the most violent depravity.
Because there were no special markings on the torso, the police could not identify the body. The torso was also disemboweled and had been there for at least 3 to 4 days before it was discovered.
There are very clear problems for the police in beginning investigations when bodies are found like this. First of all, there is an issue of identification. Second, there is the issue of what is the relationship of this person to the killer.
With no way to know who the victim was, police could only refer to her as Jane Doe, a placeholder name for when an identity is unknown. And with no way to trace who'd killed her, their investigation stalled.
In June 1998, another woman's body is found floating in the California aqueduct near the town of Bottom Willow. Fingerprints were able to be obtained from this victim, and it was determined that she was Tina Renee Gibbs, 26, and she had worked as a sex worker in Las Vegas in the months leading up to her disappearance.
Glenn Pewitt was a crime reporter in Las Vegas during the period Tina had gone missing. But her disappearance had gone relatively unnoticed at the time.
When Tina Gibbs was reported missing, it was barely a blip on the map. Literally in Las Vegas, dozens of people go missing every day, and the vast majority of them are found safe and sound.
Tina Renee Gibbs was 26 years old when she was murdered, and she actually sounded like she had a lovely upbringing, was very close to her mom. They used to do each other's hair and makeup, and her mom described her as just a person with a sunshine personality.
She fell into what I suppose we describe as a bit of a rum grouper, the wrong crowd, and in particular got a boyfriend that her mother didn't approve of. And there was a separation. Tina went off with the boyfriend and hadn't been in touch with her mother for 6 months, leading up to her discovery before her body was found.
It was clear from a forensic investigation that the person had died from strangulation. Strangulation is a very close-up method of killing that involves the person not only overpowering the victim, but also being able to see all of their emotions and all of their reactions very, very close.
Only 3 months later, in September 1998, another body was discovered. Again near the I-5 highway, but this time the woman was found naked in an irrigation ditch at the side of the road.
She was stabbed repeatedly, multiple stab wounds, and the authorities actually thought that she had possibly been discarded from a moving vehicle.
Dissimilar to the other 2 bodies and how they were found, it seemed like this was a much less meticulous disposing, almost like it had just been done on a whim. And it may show us that if this is the same killer, that their mental capacity was not only decompensating more, but that they were starting to do things that were truly more impulsive and in the moment, rather than carrying out with something that was planned in advance.
The autopsy determined that the woman was dead for several days, had been strangled, had a puncture wound in her breast, and was likely thrown from a moving vehicle into that ditch.
The victim was identified as 25-year-old Lynette White, a resident of Fontana in Southern California. And it was thought she was last seen at a nearby truck stop.
She was the mother of a 9-month-old, and her mother thought that she had just started a new career in interior design when police actually told her that she had fallen into working as a sex worker.
Her mom maintains that she went out one night going for groceries, going for milk for her 9-month-old baby, and never returned.
The discovery of Lynette's body revealed more about the changing mindset of this deadly predator who was killing innocent women across California.
He had killed a 3rd woman. He was simply dumping the victims on the side of the road. So the chances of them being discovered and identified were great. So you see that as time progresses, with each crime, he gets sloppier and sloppier, and you see almost like a laziness as far as taking the steps necessary to get away with it.
The killings seemed to be escalating and with less effort to dispose of the bodies. As the victims were being found in different parts of California, it would be harder to know if the murders were linked.
Committing crimes in one state and then depositing the remains in another state could, on the face, seem like a very clever way to try to evade police investigations, because then all of the jurisdictions would be split up in terms of the investigations, and they may or may not even be talking to each other or connecting the dots.
Could be more than one killer going across county lines. So it was a real difficult case. And there was a very real possibility that they might go unsolved.
There seemed to be little that could be done to track down this brutal murderer. And on the 23rd of October 1998, the nude body of a woman was found floating in an aqueduct near Hesperia, California, not far from the I-15, a highway heavily used by trucks.
It was determined that this woman was named Patricia Ann Tamez, a resident of Hesperia.
She was 29 years old when she was murdered. She had been working as a sex worker for a long time and also had drug habits as well as known mental health concerns. And her death appeared to be particularly grueling in that there were several physical traumas that were found on her body before she died.
She had, in fact, been strangled. And when her body was found, one breast had been removed.
This was the fourth body in 2 years to be discovered in similar circumstances along California's transportation routes. Less than 2 weeks after the latest discovery, truck driver Wayne Adam Ford was staying at a resort in Trinidad, North California. It was from here that he made a phone call to his brother.
He simply had told his brother that, "I've been drinking all day, I'm drunk, and I just want to tell you that I've hurt people." And his brother was kind of shocked by this and said, "Well, what do you mean?" And Wayne wouldn't elaborate.
Ford's brother was so worried by the phone call that he drove for 5 hours to be with him.
So his brother came along, and they spent that day doing everything they used to do as children. They went to the zoo, they ate at a restaurant, they walked around Eureka in Humboldt County.
His brother really had to piece everything together because Ford was being very abstract in talking about how he had hurt these people because he didn't share any other details like who they were or when or how.
Over time, Wayne's brother convinced him, without knowing the full details, that if he had done something that was truly wrong, he needed to turn himself in.
On the advice of his brother, Ford agreed to go to the sheriff's office. His brother was still unaware of what Ford was claiming to have done. But what happened when they arrived at the station was something that nobody could have predicted.
On November 3rd, 1998, Wayne Adam Ford walked into the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office and made a shocking revelation to the officers behind the desk. He proceeded to confess to killing 4 women, and as proof, offered up a truly horrifying piece of evidence, which was he produced a Ziploc bag with a woman's severed breast in the bag and turned it over to the authorities and said, "See, I'm telling the truth."
I'm sure they were quite shocked that he actually brought this in. I mean, confessions are kind of rare. Legitimate confessions are kind of rare, and when the person brings evidence of their own guilt with them to their voluntary interrogation, it's unusual.
36-year-old Wayne Adam Ford then confessed to the murders of the 4 women: Lynette White, Patricia Ann Tamez, Tina Renee Gibbs, and the victim known only as Jane Doe.
He gives great detail and goes on at length about how he killed these women and what he did with their bodies. And this is a treasure trove of a confession for police.
The MO was almost always the same: picking up prostitutes, drug addicts, people who would let down their guard, be willing to get in a stranger's truck for money. And once they were inside, he would be their worst nightmare. He would violently assault and torture them, oftentimes for days, and would take them to his trailer, brutalize them, ultimately culminating with a sexually motivated homicide. It's very disturbing, his behavior, and clearly this is someone who took pleasure in sadistically assaulting and killing women.
When asked why he decided to hand himself in, Ford claimed it was because of his hatred for his ex-wife, the mother of his child.
Eventually, he confessed his crimes because, according to him, he was afraid that the next target was going to be his ex-wife, and although he had a lot of anger and hatred towards her, he didn't want to leave their son an orphan.
I think that Ford's claim of being angry at his ex-wife is an excuse for him to carry out his compulsion, these compulsive acts that he had. I think that had he not been caught or had he not been persuaded to turn himself in, he might have continued killing people and not killed his ex-wife.
The breast that Wayne Adam Ford presented to the police had been cut from his last victim, Patricia Ann Tamez.
Ford seemed like he had some type of obsession or fixation on breasts and essentially harming breasts. And it appears that there was a part of him that really wanted to injure something that was really associated with femininity. And that was possibly his way of asserting dominance over women to begin with.
Ford kept sometimes what we call trophies from the bodies of his victims, and sometimes he kept the bodies in his truck for days afterwards. Serial killers are driven by this kind of internal sexual motivation. So they will want to relive what they have experienced. The ritual part of it, they will want to relive time and time again. So sometimes taking a trophy will help them relive that moment.
The breast wasn't the only memento that Ford had kept, as investigators would discover when they searched his home.
When the authorities went to his trailer, they found a coffee can with human flesh and fat in it. And they believed that that was used to contain the breasts and other body parts of his first victim, Jane Doe. He had also taken body parts from his first victim and parts of her thighs and stored them in his freezer. Even for a killer, it's horrible, right? You have to be a cold-blooded, brutal person to do something like that and to be able to stomach it.
Police interviewed Ford about these new findings.
During these interrogations, Ford went into detail about what he did with some of the missing body parts, including throwing some of them in the Mad River. Ford described going to a campsite in Trinidad and burying some of those body parts there.
Ford claimed he'd buried the head of Jane Doe in the banks of the Mad River, but this couldn't be found, meaning that another opportunity to identify his unknown victim was lost.
One fact of this that always sticks with me is the way he disposed of the bodies. He discarded these women like trash, dismembering, dumping people, trying to conceal their identities. You know, it's very troubling. And so it's heartbreaking to know that one human being could treat another this way.
On the 6th of November 1998, Wayne Adam Ford was arraigned at Humboldt County's Superior Court. But he was only charged with one count of murder, that of Jane Doe.
It was difficult because these women were found in different counties. It made it difficult to bring it to trial. Where were they going to have the trial?
Ford would have to be tried for the other murders in the counties where the bodies were found, making convictions much more complicated. Then, 2 months after Ford's arrest, a new serial killer law was enacted, meaning prosecutors could combine all of the murders into a single trial.
He ultimately was prosecuted under that law in a single jurisdiction, so they could try him for all 4 murders at once. This was really important to getting justice because otherwise you would have to have 4 different trials and possibly 4 different counties.
Ford had been transferred to West Valley Detention Center in San Bernardino in August 1999. And due to delays in the legal system, he wouldn't stand trial until 6 years later. But before this, in November 2003, there was another issue that could jeopardize the entire murder trial.
When Wayne Adam Ford first started to confess, he referenced a desire to have a lawyer. In the United States, once you invoke your right to a lawyer, that's it. The cops can't talk to you anymore. But in this case, there was a back and forth with the police. Are you sure? Are you sure you want a lawyer? And he retracted it. Said, no, I changed my mind. I don't want a lawyer. But what that ended up doing was creating a legal malaise, so to speak, of should these confessions be allowed in court.
Wayne Adam Ford had handed himself in and confessed to 4 brutal murders. But if those confessions were ruled to be inadmissible in court, Ford may never face justice for his heinous crimes. Crime reporter Glenn Pewitt covered the case at the time.
It ended up causing a lot of legal issues because if he had in fact requested a lawyer and they had denied him access to counsel, then everything that he said after that would be inadmissible in court.
In January 2004, a Superior Court judge ruled that most of Ford's confessions were in fact admissible at trial. And on the 13th of March 2006, 44-year-old Wayne Adam Ford finally went on trial for his crimes.
Ford, at first, admitted guilt to his crimes, but then during the course of the trial, changed his plea to not guilty.
Throughout the trial, a number of mitigating circumstances were suggested by Ford and his defense team.
He put forward that he was feeling a rage against his former wife and the fact that she wouldn't allow him access to his son. And this just feels like I'm going to blame anybody except myself.
He said that he was angry that he was denied visitation to his son and that he took it out on these sex workers, and he would really escalate his violence whenever one of these sex workers may have mentioned their own children.
He said, I can't stand it when they talk about their children. Now, I think that that was because he was very conscious that he was isolated from his own child.
The trial was actually where we found out many facts that we didn't know previously. The full scope of his depravity was not revealed until the actual trial. And interestingly, he had claimed at some point that he didn't really remember all of the violence. And that was, however, disproven during a point of his trial.
A man gets on the stand, I believe it was a father of one of the victims, and said how this killing happened. And he shouts, no, it didn't. Didn't happen like that. And that's just sunk him, right there. It sunk him. Because clearly he knew what happened. Because he was there, he was conscious, and he didn't black out on any of the killings.
Even more attempted justifications were raised in the courtroom.
His defense attorneys would later claim that there was a real sense of abandonment there, that his mother had left her 2 sons alone in the world.
I'm sure that not having his mother present was a risk factor for Ford to not be able to feel connection, and maybe it was lacking an opportunity to learn about socialization and empathy. But there are many people who have absent mothers and fathers, and of course don't go on to commit aggressive crimes or kill people.
During the trial, a witness was called to testify against Ford.
A sex worker who was assaulted by Wayne Adam Ford actually survived an encounter with him. And her story was that he seemed like a normal guy to start, but once he got her in his truck, he changed and he turned into a different person. He beat her, strangled her, and raped her. And before he was about to kill her, he pulled out of his pocket a photo of his ex-wife and son and showed this woman the photo and told her, this is why. You know, this is why I do this. And she was able to escape and get away, and he did not kill her. But that tells you a little bit about how he did it, you know, and what was his motivation.
She found an escape area of the back of his truck. There was a small door, and then she escaped when he'd slowed the truck down or came to a truck stop.
After a 3-month trial, the jury started their deliberations, and on the 27th of June 2006, they returned their verdict.
The jury concludes that he was in control of himself, he knew what he was doing, and he was capable of distinguishing between right and wrong. The jury of 7 women and 5 men found him guilty, and they convicted him of all 4 first-degree murders.
44-year-old Wayne Adam Ford was sentenced to death and taken to San Quentin prison to serve out the rest of his days behind bars.
It was an important case to cover, to let people know that there are very dangerous people out there, and Wayne Adam Ford's the perfect example.
Investigative journalist and true crime author Victoria Redstall interviewed Ford while he was locked up. She described how Ford revealed gory details about what he'd done with the various body parts.
He cut off the breasts, as he did with most of them, and then he melted the breasts in the oven. Then he drained the oil and put it in a coffee can. And he tried to bite into the breast to see what it would taste like, and it was too tough. You can't say he's a cannibal, but he just tried it because it was there. He wanted to see what it would be like to eat the bodies, and he just didn't want to swallow them. Wayne had put that head in his fridge, and it got frostbite on the nose, so he did some bad things to that head, I know that.
In June 2023, 25 years after the torso of a woman was found, advances in DNA sequencing finally helped to identify who Jane Doe was.
They determined that the torso belonged to 25-year-old Carrie Ann Cummings. Carrie Ann Cummings left her home in Eugene, Oregon, and began couch surfing, living a fairly transient lifestyle for several years.
The family never knew what happened. And so it took a quarter century to get answers. And they were actually very appreciative of knowing versus not knowing. And even though it's a horrible fate, at least they have some sense of knowledge of what happened and why.
Those involved in the case believe there could be more victims of Wayne Adam Ford than are already known about.
When you look at the MO and the behavior pattern, you have someone who is a compulsive killer. You know, someone who is out of control and who is driven by the blending of sex and violence. So those type of people are rare. And they're also very dangerous, and more often than not, they cannot stop.
I think he's killed a lot more. There are some serial killers that want to add to their crimes and they want to show off about it. Wayne was the opposite. But Wayne was definitely very, very ashamed of it. So the only ones he admitted to were the ones where his DNA are on the bodies.
Former FBI agent Bobby Chacon revealed there's now a truck stop serial killer database that the FBI maintains.
Because oftentimes we have found a lot of serial killers roaming these truck stops because they are multi-state in nature. These drivers go from state to state to state. The women that frequent these truck stops as prostitutes are often very transient. Nobody even knows their real name. So the FBI began the truck stop serial killer database to start matching up women that go missing along these very, very common long-haul trucking routes.
Wayne Adam Ford will remain behind bars until he dies and will never prey on another victim again.
This is somebody who's dangerous and needs to be kept behind bars because they can't control their behaviors.
You look at Ford's motivations and the people that he really hurt and the way that he hurt them and the fact that it gave him pleasure. And he would have carried on and on and on if there hadn't been that intervention by his brother.
I believe if he was to be released within 6 months, he would kill again because it's a driving force in him. It's not to be stopped. It's impossible to stop. I think he would kill again if he was on the outside.
Wayne Adam Ford drove up and down California when he was working as a truck driver, preying on vulnerable women along the way. Once in his truck, he would rape and torture them before killing them and dismembering or discarding their bodies like trash. He admitted he would have carried on killing if he hadn't turned himself in. For the sheer brutality of his crimes, Wayne Adam Ford will be remembered as one of the world's most evil killers.